Hello everybody and welcome back to ZakIsCinema. Yes, welcome back everybody. If you find yourself just kind of struggling to find anybody that'll talk to you about these Hell House movies, please I beg you, please join me. Please join me here at ZakIsCinema. Nobody knows what these movies are. When I try to talk to them about it, they're like, you watch a movie about hell? And I'm like, well, it's mostly about a hotel, slightly referencing hell, of course, but yeah, they're pretty good. You should check them out if you like it. And then they just like turn around and walk away, and they're like, I'm not talking about hell with you. It's whatever. This is what we have each other here for. So today we're going to be reviewing and discussing the new movie House LLC Lineage, which came out in 2025. After a near-death experience, Vanessa returns to Abaddon, only to face deadly visions and uncover her terrifying link to the hotel's haunted legacy. So as we jump into the review for Hell House Lineage, this is the fifth installment in the Hell House franchise, and this will be a spoiler-free review moving forward. So on the channel, we've been covering all of the Hell House movies this past week, so feel free to check out those videos, and I'll have a ranking coming out shortly in just a couple days here. But I was definitely excited when I first stumbled across the first one, realized there was a whole franchise I got to delve into. And then in a couple weeks, I was like, oh my God, they're having a new one. And the first time it's being released to theaters, it's literally like I've been searching for God my entire life. And I think this is where I finally saw him create a vision and path for me. It was awesome. Like we said, first movie in the franchise to get a theatrical run. And it is the first one to ditch the found footage aspect and go with a more traditional cinematic experience here. So I was so curious in checking it out, how it would feel different, how it would feel in the theatrical experience and ditching the found footage. I was just so curious to see what this was going for. And the director was doing interviews stating this was going to be the last one, but I think he's kind of gone back on this and said the last one he's going to do. So I don't know. I went into it with my expectations thinking it was the last one. But let's jump into the review section, starting with the positives or just the things that I enjoyed most about this movie. Thankfully, I can say, at least to me, I did really appreciate the change from found footage over to a more traditional cinematic experience. I was so confused as to why they were making this change, but as soon as you start the movie, you kind of realize why it almost needed to be changed like this, and I think they could do a little bit more in some different things now that it's not found footage. For example, we're actually following the character of Vanessa, who was the lead documentary person interviewing the Insomnia cast and crew in our third chapter. And we also have Alicia from our third movie in this one as well. Alicia was one of the experts. I forget exactly what her role was, but she was one of the experts being interviewed and spliced in throughout our third one. We pick up a couple years shortly after the events of the third one, where Alicia and especially Vanessa are so strucken by grief and trauma and guilt of what occurred in the third movie, especially Vanessa here, where it wouldn't make sense for them to be doing another documentary about how traumatized they are, how upset they are, how frustrated they are at themselves. It wouldn't make sense for it to be found footage and them recording their experiences with this, because they're really just trying to deal with the grief and guilt and events from our third one. So I appreciated that. It makes sense for the story that they're going, and I think it leads to something new that we haven't seen in the franchise. And I would say for the most part, I think the scares work just as well in this movie, even though it's ditching the found footage. I had a fear going in because I really appreciated the scares kind of throughout the franchise, but especially in that first one, how it really put me in the center of these events and really made me feel like I was kind of journeying through my own little haunted house experience. So I was afraid the scares wouldn't work as well, but I think the director and everyone that worked on this movie built up the tension tension, at least. We'll get into some of my issues with the scares, but the atmosphere, the eerie sense of dread going on in this movie is honestly incredible, and I think it's built really well with its camera use and camera work. Where, for example, it has this really cool opening clown scene where we get a character going back to the carnival in the town of Abaddon. He's at some, that pin booth where you throw the ball at the pins. I think I'm forgetting what it's called, but he's in there, and then we see that iconic clown mask sitting off into the distance in the darkness, and the way the camera moves and follows the character is able to get a steady shot in the darkness. And at one point in the scene, the character's only holding a lighter, trying to light the scene around him. And the camera's kind of following him as he does it. So I think it was able to build up the tension in a different way that I haven't seen before in the Hell House franchise, where instead of the shaky cam, running, and you get that unique experience that way, but the sense of dread and tension each scene was able to build up, I think was really, really effective here, which was good to see. And for me, I think the inclusion of finally having a Hell House movie with some music, a score to it, some build-up tension music to the scares really added a lot, not only to the scares, but just the sense of dread and atmosphere in the movie that I didn't realize I was missing until I watched this. This movie's obviously getting an increased budget. It is still a very low budget horror movie, but I was just so impressed with some of the drone shots. The sense of scope and scale of Abaddon is something we've never seen before in this franchise, so I like that they were able to utilize that more and get more use out of its environment now that we're not in found footage anymore. And I think it makes sense, like we were talking about, with the story that we're telling, because now we can really follow Alicia and what she's doing. We could follow Vanessa and what she's doing and jump around to all these different places and having things simultaneously going on, which tries to help with the pacing and momentum of the movie. And trust me, we'll get into my frustrations with this movie. I'm sorry, I'm kind of spoiling some of my thoughts on this, but I still think it's just so impressive how, I believe the director Cognetti is how you say it. I'm so sorry, Mr. Cognetti. I'm going to go with Cognetti. He was able to turn such a simple story, really, in the first one of really just clowns moving without reason and really turn it into this big franchise with now 5 movies in. And there's issues with it, but the sense of size and scope in this movie is big. I really enjoyed the attempts of trying to connect to almost every single movie, where when I was watching this, it really did feel like a culmination, like it was leading to the proper ending to this story. And I like how it tries to tie everything together, where you literally have to see all of these movies because it references pretty much all of the movies. And again, not getting into spoilers, but with the way it connects to other movies, I like how it introduces new perspectives on events that we've seen before, where Vanessa, since she's so struck with grief and trauma from our third movie, she gets these nightmares, these visions where she's almost put into either places at the Carmichael Manor or the Abaddon Hotel and seeing some of our characters from previous scenes that we've seen before, but maybe a new perspective, maybe adding a little bit more to it. So I thought that was interesting. I was so scared it was going to go into it was one of the Paranormal Activity movies where they are trying to recontextualize a scene in the first one by showing you too much, and then it kind of ruins the first one looking back on it. They don't do anything like that. I think it helps a lot, especially because these are really nightmares and visions and the character isn't actually right there. I like the expansion of the lore, how it really is just trying to culminate and connect to every single movie. To me, I think the jump scares were just as effective, if not in some instances more effective. I like that we get a bit more inclusion of gore, which has been significantly missing throughout this entire franchise, and I assume the increased budget really helped with that. I also think where the movie was leading to, that ending back 20, 30 minutes is really where everything's ramping up, and it was setting up something very interesting, but we'll get into my issues. But still, when I was there, I'm like, okay, it's getting going now. It's doing some really cool things. Like I said, now that it's not found footage, we can follow Vanessa doing her thing. We could follow Alicia going in and doing her thing. So you get like multiple scares, multiple storylines trying to combine at the end. And I think the ending, despite the ending note that it leaves off on, what it was doing was really interesting, where it gave me that haunted house experience, that haunted house feel. Nothing terribly unique or anything, but it felt unique enough to the franchise where there are definitely some really great standout moments throughout. But let's jump into my mixed aspects for this movie. And well, I don't think the pacing is terrible. It is the longest movie in the franchise, and I feel like, unfortunately, you could definitely feel that, especially in the middle parts where it feels a bit meandering. And like I said, not bad, and it didn't frustrate me. Just kind of looking back on it, I could see where you could really trim it down, because it does at points really bog down this movie. And I think, unfortunately, one of the biggest parts of that is we're stuck following the character of Vanessa, where I think it's a good idea because she is a surviving member of our third one. I wanted to see what she was doing, so it makes sense for her character to be so traumatized, depressed, and just disconnected and isolated. But at the same time, that does not lead to an interesting character where she is presenting like that 24/7. She does not change. She does not go on this big arc where we get to see her personality or character change. She is just stuck in that grief, traumatic state of mind the entire time, and that just leads to such a boring protagonist where even when they're doing somewhat interesting things, I just don't feel interested in following this one character. Like she's just not enough to lift this movie or carry this movie. And I think Vanessa, the actress that portrays her, does a really good job. Like, this movie, dialogue's kind of iffy at points, but I think it has some of the best acting in the franchise. But just as a main character, it was kind of frustrating, and this movie did not need to be as long as it was, especially because those middle parts, they are introducing something interesting, but it just kind of meanders all around, and there's not really a central plot to it all. So even though I wasn't stuck there being bored, looking back on it, I kind of almost dread the point in time I'm going to rewatch this, knowing where it kind of leads to, and knowing that there's a big middle chunk where it does kind of feel a little bit repetitive, even though I was kind of enjoying myself a little bit in those moments, if that makes sense. That's why I'm mixed on it, because I'm not really sure which way I lean, one or the other. But yeah, let's jump into my negatives, or the things that I just did not like about this movie. And unfortunately, I gotta say, the ending is just my biggest negative, where I was going to forgive the movie for its kind of dragged out parts, some of its repetitive scares and meandering plot, because it felt like it was maybe leading to something. Like, I knew there had to be something else, and I'm like, okay, if they can land this, it's going to make everything significantly better, significantly more tolerable. But the ending note it leaves off on is just so frustrating and just so disappointing. The ending to me really felt like it came out of nowhere. It goes nowhere. It leaves me with so many unsatisfying answers and even more questions, and cuts off in the middle of the climax to the point where I guess I thought a part one was going to pop up on the end screen, and part two's maybe a surprise drop a month later on Shudder or something. That's how bad it felt when it left off like that. Almost just kind of incomplete. And at one point, I was really just expecting to do a spoiler review, go over everything as much as I can remember, but this movie has a big exposition problem where I just watched all of these movies, yet I still found myself kind of confused with its convoluted lore and exposition scenes, the way they're referencing all the movies and characters. I almost at one point felt like I needed a notepad to like quickly jot down during some of these exposition scenes between like Alicia and Vanessa here. It was just so much information, and not done in a way where it's discovered or there's a mystery. We're just going to characters as they kind of explain new things that they found and are now telling our characters for the audience. So that was just frustrating too. And again, I was willing to forgive it if the ending kind of stuck its landing, which it did not to me. I feel like I'm so just mixed and all over the place on this movie, because the things that they do well, they do really well with, but then due to the ending and where it kind of leaves off on, it just kind of sours my experience on almost the whole thing. Like, even though I was praising the ending, there's now just things that I felt like went really nowhere. Alicia and this priest that she finds in the ending climax is going to the Carmichael Manor to, I guess, maybe resurrect Mr. Carmichael and ask him to stop or something. Like, that was never really explained, but I guess I thought it was going to be explained once they were there doing things, but that just ultimately goes nowhere and feels like it gets cut off as soon as it really gets going. And then, like I said, Vanessa's having these visions, which lead to some cool scenes, some nightmares that lead to some cool scenes, but that is also the way the movie is also kind of delivering its reveals and expositions to us. So there's a couple points where Vanessa just passes out from nothing, so we could just have a exposition vision lore dump scene, which was very frustrating, and that's how they get her to where she needs to be in the third act, which just felt so rushed and kind of lame. And at one point at the ending, they introduce some cool things, but it feels so rushed. For example, the stuff they do with Vanessa's brother feels like it comes out of nowhere. It goes in a place that's unexpected, but it's unexpected because it wasn't set up, or it makes no sense for the character to do that, and it comes out of nowhere almost, whereas and the movie doesn't even really address it all that much because the movie ends about 5 minutes later, so it doesn't even have time to, where if you took your time with that throughout the middle section, that would have landed better, but you saved it for the last 15 minutes. And at the end, we get some of the biggest character reveals, connections between the Abaddon, the Carmichael, Vanessa, and her relationship with the hotel, and some other characters that are revealed to us. But none of it is set up. It just feels like it's stuffed in there to do something surprising, but they didn't do the work to set it up properly. So therefore, it turns out unsatisfying and surprising, but surprising in a disappointing way, if that makes sense. And we get this big character reveal towards the end of the movie, and that's when the movie just cuts off, where I thought it was going for another 10, 15 minutes, and I'm like, okay, this is what's going to save the movie, because this is going to kind of help explain some things, really recontextualize the whole thing, and then bam, the fucking movie just cuts right off, which is so frustrating, because what they set up was interesting. It's almost kind of bullshit. It doesn't make any sense, but I thought they were going to go somewhere with it and pay it off. But it's such a big reveal that they don't pay off. And that's not a satisfying ending whatsoever, because you didn't set it up, and for it to be satisfying, you either need to set it up or pay it off. And they just chose to reveal it and do neither of those two options. So I'm just left here with so many other questions, and it almost felt like an almost 2-hour movie to get us to the movie that the director really wanted to do, to really wrap everything up, but he just meandered for 2 hours and is now saying that he doesn't want to direct or write any of the others. Like, feel free to do so, but he's done with the franchise. And I'm like, well, dude, like, why would you leave it off like that? Why wouldn't you wrap things up? It's so hard to talk without spoilers, and I feel like I'm almost kind of even getting there a little bit, so I'm going to stop talking here. But if you've seen the movie, you definitely know what I'm talking about. Big climactic reveal that is treated as the wrap-up for our movie, but it literally just sets up either a climax or another movie. So the movie just almost feels like it's too long, but also missing 20 minutes, if that makes sense. But I would say overall here, this was a confusing, frustrating experience, and I was not expecting to walk out of this movie so confused, feeling convoluted, feeling like I needed to take notes in the movie. I was not anticipating this at all. Even someone who just watched this entire franchise, the reveals felt forced, convoluted, made little bit to no sense, and it's frustrating because it's a well-made movie. There are positives. It was going in a direction that I was willing to really, really enjoy it if it could land the ending rating, but just kind of looking back on it, it is a frustrating experience, and ultimately it just doesn't know what to do with any of the cool and creative things it was trying to set up and show us. For my rating for this movie, this was a difficult one to rate. I think I'm going to put it in that rent to stream end, but kind of on the lower side, where I'd maybe look to stream it more so than pay to rent it. Hopefully it's playing on a platform I'm already paying for here, but most of that rating is coming from because I genuinely do want to rewatch this, not because I thoroughly enjoyed myself, but just because I want to kind of literally take notes to see what I missed out on, to see if it makes it any better, or if it makes it a little bit more interesting. And if they do make a new one, I feel like I actually need to take notes on this movie here when I'm watching it. So you guys have my thoughts on House LLC Lineage. Please let me know down below what you thought of this movie. What'd you think of the ending? Did you like it more than me? Were you kind of confused and frustrated like me? Did you hate it more than me? I would love to hear people's thoughts, because I don't know, I could see this being a love it or hate it movie, but a very mixed experience, I'm assuming, is what the reception is really going to be here. So let me know your thoughts and feelings on this movie down below here. Like I said, look forward to that franchise ranking coming out in just a couple days. So that's about it. I appreciate anybody watching my videos, so thank you so much. And yeah, look forward to more ZakIsCinema coming very soon.